We continue our position group ranking pods ahead of the season. This is our second. Hopefully we get to 4. Fingers crossed. We'll see. The season's getting here faster than I thought it was. We're in August. I don't know what to do here. Today we are going to rank the receiving cores in the Big 12. That is both wide receivers and tight ends, because yes, on some teams tight ends do catch footballs, some more than others. So joining me today to break these down 1 through 14, and then maybe we'll tear them off at the end if we have time. He is returning. He's been here every single year. He has done a different position group every single year. He writes one of our favorite preseason magazines. He is, of course, Joe Broback of College Football Network. Joe, welcome back to the show, man.
I appreciate being back. Maybe a little bit easier position this year, but nonetheless, I'm excited to be back.
I'm gonna argue, since this is our second one, I would say the offensive line was easier than this one was, in my opinion. And bringing in the Big 12 perspective, a first-time guest, very excited to have him on the podcast, Joey Hickey of LonghornsWire. Joey, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I always like to get some, as long as I've been doing this, it's always nice to find some first-time guests. I always like to get some new faces, some new voices, and some new opinions. Okay, so we are going to do this 1 through 14. As I said, we'll be ranking all the receiving cores, not wide receivers, just wide receivers. And I'm gonna be honest, this one was tough. I had a hard time with this one and actually getting them 1 through 14. I have a feeling we're all going to have the same number 1. I'll be curious from there. And I'm really curious about the 3 through 10 and 11, because that's where I felt like I had the most trouble. Let's just start with this, Joe. Where did you have the most difficulty putting your list together?
I think when I learned Hunter Deckers is in trouble, I think figuring out where Iowa State was going to be. But fortunately, I think I had them in the right spot. But I think you're right. We kind of talked about this before we recorded. There's 1, maybe 2 teams that stand out, and then there's a handful of teams behind them that you could see maybe take a step forward and get into that top tier. But I think teams 3 through 10, you could honestly move any of them anywhere, and there won't be too many arguments if you did that.
Joey, same question.
Yeah, I agree. It's a pretty loaded receiver room. I don't think that there's a ton of elite rooms, but there's a ton of solid rooms that are not very discernible.
Yeah, I think I agree. Looking at Phil Steele's magazine, he ranks the top 63 receiving cores, and you had 2 in the top 10, and then 8 in the top 63, and then 4 outside of that. So that kind of tells you I have a feeling we all might have the same top 2. Like I said, it's when we get to 3 and on where I'm really interested to see. So let's just go ahead and get this knocked out. I feel like we're all going to have the same number 1. Joey, as a first-time guest, you're up first, sir. Who is your top receiving core in the Big 12?
Well, at the risk of being a homer,
Bias.
I mean, it's really hard not to pick the Longhorns here. Obviously, you have Xavier Worthy and Jatavian Sanders coming back, 2 first-round talents. Then you add A.D. Mitchell, who I think could be the best receiver by the time we're all said and done. And then Isaiah Nayor, Jordan Whittington, he's pretty consistent. So I think as a whole, I think Texas is probably the best receiver core.
Joe?
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who disagrees with that sentiment. You look at the amount of talent they have coming back, and we've already mentioned a bunch of those guys. The one thing I would say with Mitchell is I'm so hesitant because we saw what happened with Jermaine Burton at Alabama. I think a lot of people just assume, oh, this is gonna be 1,000-yard receiver. And obviously, Alabama's had their struggles, and through various different positions, but Burton didn't exactly wow me, to be honest. And I think there's a lot of talent with what he was going to bring to the table. And Mitchell obviously is a different player, and he goes to a different system, one that I think is a little bit more explosive than what we saw with Alabama. But I really still like this group. Even freshman Jonte Cook, I really like what I saw from him. Now, whether or not he gets on the field is probably a big question. The amount of talent you have returning is just insane. So to me, we were kind of talking about this before. Texas honestly stands in its own group because of the amount of talent they have And if Xavier Worthy can, figure out how to drop less passes, and if Quinn Ewers can find a way to not overthrow him, which is pretty impressive with how fast Worthy is. I mean, Worthy can beat any DB in the country. I think even when he was dropping passes and the overthrows, he was cooking guys. So I think that there's a lot of potential still in this group to get even better, and that's saying something given that they're the number one team in this list.
Yeah, it's a runaway number one with Texas. I don't think anyone's surprised by that if you've been paying attention to anything in this offseason. It's not just the most talented, like the ceiling, there's no, even you look at some of the different ones we're going to talk about, like that have a lot of potential and have high ceilings. It's not just that Texas is the best receiving core right now. The ceiling on this core is ridiculous with Xavier Worthy and Winnington and A.D. Mitchell again. I think it's about a lot of potential. Ja'Tavion Sanders could be like the best tight end in the country. And you kind of glossed over, Joey, Isaiah Nayor. Like, this is a guy that transferred from Wyoming last offseason. Everyone was super excited about it. He gets injured, misses the whole season, and now he's going to be a backup. Like, this guy starts on just about every team in the country except for Texas, assuming A.D. Mitchell. I mean, it's just like that's the depth here that they have. And as much as they rotate through their wide receivers at Texas, like it's an easy number one. And I agree. Like, this Texas could be in a tier all their own for as good as they are and as deep as they are. So let's move on where it might get a little more interesting. Joey, who do you have at number 2?
I like Texas Tech. I really like that receiver core. So you got your 4 top receivers from last year coming back. You add in Dre McCray. I'm a huge fan of Jaron Bradley. I think he's a really big impact player. And so I really see that as maybe one of the top 10 receiver cores in the nation. That might be a little bit bold, but I really think Texas Tech's going to be really good.
Joe?
Right there with you. I'm with you there. I think the thing I struggle with the most with Texas Tech is I just really wanted Graham Harrell be back and just run the air raid again. I just had that feeling with the number of receivers that they have back. And I know that coaching staff really likes Dre McCray. I think that they think he can be the guy to take the top off the defense to add to this talented group. So yeah, Texas Tech, as long as Tyler Shuck can stay healthy, or if it is Baron Morton or whoever's going to take over, if Shuck can't stay healthy, I think this offense is really exciting overall. But the wide receivers, yeah, really stand out to me.
We're 2 for 2 so far, guys, here in agreement. It's like Texas can be in a tier all their own. I would put Texas Tech, and I don't think it's crazy to say they'd be top 10, Joey. Phil Steele has them, I think, number 8 in his preseason magazine. So, like, it's not just you. And I think it's about, I don't think the ceiling here is as high as Texas, but the depth here, their top 5 are back from last year, and 8 of their top 9. You throw in Dre McCray from Austin Peay, who had like 1,021 yards and 9 touchdowns last year. Nehemiah Martinez, who Joey McGuire has been very high on. I like Miles Price in the slot a lot. And Jaron Bradley, like, I think he's at least like 3rd or 4th team in every preseason, something that does more than one team. And I think he has so much potential. And if he takes a big step in his sophomore year, like, you could have the star, the guy, the go-to at Texas Tech, along with just a solid wide receiver room. I mean, even at tight end, you've got Baylor Cupp and you've got Mason Tharp. And I like both of those guys. Like, I just think the ceiling isn't as high as Texas, but the floor is so high for Texas Tech's receiving core. Like, you just like, and as many plays as they have to have a good receiving core. It's just a very, very solid and reliable unit that still has room to grow. I mean, because again, Bradley was a freshman last year. So I easy number 2 for everybody. All right, Joey, number 3, who do you got?
This is probably going to separate us here. I think TCU is really, really good. I think that, JoJo Early is probably the most underrated receiver in this league just because he doesn't have as much reps. You saw him tear apart Tennessee, Arkansas on his short stint on the field. And so I think that he's really going to take over. And then the other guys are going to kind of come along.
Okay. All right. Joe, who do you have?
I'm 3 for 3 here. Phil, I don't know. You better agree with us, or I don't know what's gonna happen here. TCU is my third team, and a lot of that to me has to do with Sonny Dykes and his track record. You coming from SMU and his ability to just essentially create explosive offenses at SMU is pretty much going to carry over to TCU. And I think they did a great job of hitting the transfer portal hard. You also bring in a guy in like Jalen Robinson from Ole Miss, who was formerly at UCF, someone who could be another guy in the slot that will be a big time playmaker if he can find his place. There's just so much depth, and even you're looking to replace Quentin Johnston. That's obviously not going to be easy, but Savion Williams has that similar build, has the potential to be that guy for this offense. I think we saw it at times last year. We just didn't see the consistency, but that's also because you had three other guys ahead of him that were taking catches away from him. So now he gets a chance to be in that role. I think Jared Wiley's a really underrated tight end as well. I really like his game. He's also a huge target at 6'7". So I think they have a lot of good. They also brought in Dalen Wright from Minnesota, formerly of Texas A&M. That's another big target for Chandler Morris to utilize. So there's plenty of talent here. And pair that with what Sonny Dykes can do, even without Garrett Riley, I really like where this group can go.
All right, finally, some variety. It's about time. I'm going to try not to be, again, here comes my homer pick. I have OSU number 3. And I'll get to TCU soon. My issue with TCU is I see a lot of potential, but I have a lot of questions. And you can make the same statement for Oklahoma State because they lost like everybody but Brendan Presley from last year. Jaden Bray should be healthy and is back, and I'm very high on Jaden Bray. Brendan Presley, is going to be one of the best slot receivers in the Big 12. You get Dazon Stribling from Washington State, and we've seen them do well with transfers from Wazoo. He was the leading receiver at Wazoo, so he'll take a starting spot. They brought in a bunch of transfers. You got to have will Arlen Bruce live up to the recruiting rankings? How does Leon Johnson transfer from D3 all the way up to P5? Then you get young guys, Rashad Owens, we've seen flashes of Talon Shetron. I just trust Oklahoma State's wide receiving core. And I trust the job that Mike Gundy and Casey Dunn do. I can question Casey Dunn as a play caller. I just don't question him as a receiver coach. I think this is not there's not a Tylan Wallace in this unit. There's not a Justin Blackman in this unit. This reminds me more of like the years when like Josh Stewart was their top receiver. That's not a shot at Brendan Presley. I really like Brendan Presley. And I just think there is enough potential here. And I trust OSU when it comes to receivers to have a good, deep, even though they've had to replace so many guys, receiving core. So I've got them at number 3. So Joey, who do you have at 4?
At 4, I have UCF, and that's probably another bold one. But big fan of Javon Baker. Man, that dude is about to tear up the Big 12, and adding Kobe Hudson to that, that's just a solid duo. I think that's going to be one of the best duos in the Big 12. So, don't really care necessarily what's behind them. I really think those two can pretty much carry this thing.
Okay, all right.
This is where I struggled because UCF was a team that I was pretty high on. I think the thing that worries me is Malzahn's system and how much that system limits what those receivers can do. Because I agree, Baker and Hudson are studs, but it's just like how many catches are you going to get this year? And in a Big 12 where you might have to score a ton of points, I just don't know how adaptable Malzahn's going to be. So I actually have BYU 4th. Now, obviously, Keaton Slovis is someone I'm higher on than the consensus. When you look at his time at USC, what he was doing there was pretty incredible. I think that he was making a lot of throws that are kind of getting swept under the rug for the last couple of years. Obviously, his time as Pitt didn't go super well. And so he's looking to bounce back. But if he gets back to his 2019 form, then BYU is going to be really fun to watch. And then that includes a group of receivers and a tight end that I'm really high on. Keanu Hill is a really talented player. Cody Epps could be an absolute monster in the slot. Chase Roberts was a guy that kind of was like a 4th or 5th option, but when he was thrust into a spotlight role, I think he did really well. And then you get Isaac Rex coming back from injury. If he can stay healthy, he's one of the better tight ends in the Big 12. So I think that this group I think you need a few things to go right, but if those things do go right, then you're looking at a really dangerous group in terms of the passing attack.
Yeah, this just got really interesting. Okay. I am not far behind you guys on TCU. I have them at number 4. And here's the thing, like, to me, TCU has the potential to be in that like tier 1 with Texas. I see the talent, but I've got to see it actually come together. Like, I've got to see JoJo early, like, turned into the thing that people keep saying is, I really like Savion Williams, but I've got to see that happen. This is also a group that, like I was texting with some TCU people, and it's like, well, we think it's this. Like, there's a chance that like Jerry Wiley could be good at tight end, but like, there's a chance that Cordell Russell, who's talented incoming freshman, could be a starter. I love the addition of John Paul Richardson. Like, he was a very, very reliable guy at Oklahoma State. That is not somebody that Oklahoma State wanted to lose, but he was stuck behind Brennan Presley, and he wanted a starting job, and he's going to get that at TCU. Like, they brought in a bunch of guys who have talent. I trust them to maximize that talent. If they maximize it to the actual potential, this is a tier 1 unit, but I've got to see it. And that's nitpicking at the unit I have number 4. So at number 5, Joey, who do you have?
Number 5, I'm going to go with Oklahoma. I think there are obviously limitations. There are a ton of questions, but I really, really like Jalil Farouk. I think he's a great receiver. Then you add Austin Stogner. The questions start coming after that. And there are questions about, Venables talking about Gavin Freeman's the best receiver in our unit by far. That raises questions, but I think as a whole, they'll be pretty decent receiver core.
All right, Joe?
That's where I have UCF. Again, Baker and Hudson are really good. Alec Holler's an underrated tight end. They also bring Trent Whitmore from Florida. They bring Corey Gamage in from Marshall. And I think that you see Johnny Richardson maybe utilize as a running back in the passing game a little bit more. He has speed that's really fun to watch. But yeah, UCF is a fun group. It's just a matter, again, of is that offense going to utilize it? It's very much a run first offense, especially with Plumlee running the offense. But I think that this group is very talented and could be really fun to watch when the season's all over.
All right, Joey, you and I agree here on Oklahoma, and we're getting into the part where this is why the middle is such a mess. I'm not sure there's much that separates 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Jalil Farouk has potential. I think he really does. And the people are very high on him, but I think part of that's he's going to be the guy for Oklahoma, more so than I think he is as good as, say, Marvin Mims. Drake Stoops is one of the most irritatingly reliable receivers in the Big 12. They already talked about Gavin Freeman. Great. Just 2 slot guys who are going to drive everyone crazy and going to catch everything thrown their way. But from there, you've got Andrell Anthony, who transferred from Michigan. You got Brennan Thompson from Texas, maybe Jaquiz Petaway. I believe in OU. There's a ton of potential here. I love the tight end. Austin Stogner is going to be they're just going to produce another NFL caliber, super good tight end with Austin Stogner, he being the guy. My concern with Oklahoma is I think there is talent at the top. I have questions about if somebody goes down, if Drake Stoops goes down, if Jalil Farouk goes down, if Austin Stogner goes down. I don't know. Their depth is not reliable enough to me to be super high on them. And I think that's going to be an issue here the rest of the way is you've got a guy I like and a couple guys that are good, and the depth concerns me. And so I've got Oklahoma at 5. It's a distant 5 from number 1. There's not a lot behind the starters that I'm just thrilled about. So number 6, Joey, who do you have?
I'm going to go with Houston. I feel like I might be overrating them here a little bit, but Matthew Golden, man, he's a good receiver. And that's just a system to where they're going to put up numbers. And so it may not be indicative of, oh, this receiver group's really, really good. It might be indicative of, man, the system's really good. So it's going to be hard to tell the difference. But I think they're going to have a good receiver core.
All right. Joe?
I have Oklahoma here. I think when I first did this, I had them 10th just because of, I don't know, you're losing Marvin Mims, who was such a focal point of that offense. It was obviously a big loss, you don't really have a proven guy that can be that number one. But like you guys mentioned, there's a lot of potential with Farouk, with Andre Anthony, Drake Stoops. Uh, I think I saw DJ Graham is now a wide receiver, and all I can see when I hear his name is that one sick one-handed interception he had against Nebraska. So when I was putting these together, I was like, all right, I got to go stop and watch that about 100 times to continue doing this. But I think the big thing for Oklahoma is last year it was if Dylan Gabriel was healthy, they were fine. But as soon as he went down, it was like you're almost watching a Conference USA team try to throw things together. Like it was just not very pretty to watch. And maybe this year is different if Jackson Arnold is the real deal. It sounds like I think the fans and the coaching staff really like what he is about. But again, Phil, you mentioned where's the depth here? If there's a number one guy, first of all, who is it? And if that guy goes down, who is there another guy that can step up, or is it a committee that can step up as well? So I really like the potential here. But there are a couple things that do concern me that could go wrong.
Okay. Here's my hot take at 6, if maybe. I have Kansas. I like the starters for Kansas. Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner, Mason Fairchild, all back. I think those 4 as starting pass catchers are a very solid collection. I don't think there's a first team Big 12 guy on there, but it wouldn't shock me if any of those 4 guys ended up as second team All Big 12 at the end of the season. I really like these 4. Behind them, like mannequins out there. I have no idea, and I don't mean that as insult, but like there's nothing behind them that makes me like excited, convinced. Like if one of them goes down, I'm concerned. I don't think they're going to. I mean, the starters are going to have to play a lot of plays, and that concerns me on an offense that plays as high tempo as they do. I like the starters. I don't like the depth at all. So that's why I have Kansas here.
I would go Kansas with my next one as well.
All right, Joey. All right, so it's not a hot take for me. Okay.
That good. I mean, you can make the case arguably that they could be all the way up to top 3 if you wanted to. But I mean, those 3 receivers, you add Mason Fairchild to that. I mean, that offense is going to put up numbers. They averaged like 35.5 points per game last year. So they're going to put up big numbers. So I would agree with you.
Okay, I like that. See, and here I thought I was coming up with something crazy.
I actually am going to go along with that. I have Kansas coming in next as well.
Yeah.
I think for me, a lot of this was looking at who's coming back, but also like what does the quarterback situation look like? And getting a guy like Jalen Daniels, who's the best Jay Daniels in college football. So he is he's so fun to watch. And for me, as someone who really likes seeing these underdog teams, I mean, Kansas has been the last 2 years, Phil and I were just like, oh, Kansas, worst position group, Kansas, worst position group. Like it was just this team was so bad for so long. The fact that Lance Leipold figured something out is really fun. And the first few games of the season last year were some of the most entertaining games for the true diehard college football fans to see Kansas undefeated, past week 1. So I think that Jalen Daniels coming back plays a huge role in that. I'm a big fan of Quentin Skinner. I think that he can be an explosive player. You look at what he did against TCU. I think that's kind of just a preview of what could come in 2023. They also bring back Jared Casey for Texas fans. They probably don't like that name if they remember his game-winning touchdown catch in 2021. So back when Texas was struggling to beat the likes of Kansas. But yeah, I really like what Leipold's done. I really like this group. I think that they have a lot of potential, but again, that concern is going to be the depth. Maybe they throw the Kansas Jayhawk mascot out there to help out, but yeah, there's some concerns there for sure.
I remember Jared Casey for his Applebee's commercials after that game as well. Okay, well, I have UCF here, so I am the lowest on UCF, and it's. I mean, you look at everybody else. I see a couple pieces with UCF. I like Javon Baker. I think he's got real potential to explode in the Big 12 and make a name for himself. From there, like, Okay. Kobe Hudson was the third leading receiver last year. He's back. He had 641 yards. Gamage from Marshall, transfer came in. He has potential. You never know with G5 to P5. You have Trent Whitmore from Florida. He's done some things like, besides Baker, there's no one on here where I'm like, yeah, like the potential is there. And I think there's obviously some talent, and I trust UCF to put out some solid wide receivers. But I'm like, I can't pick. Like with Kansas, I've got 4 guys I like, and then nothing behind them. With UCF, like I like Javon Baker better than everybody else on Kansas. I might like Javon Baker better than everybody else in Oklahoma. But I'm not as confident as you guys are in the rest of the unit as a whole. And I don't have any. I've got nothing on the tight end position. I can't tell you anything about that, and that just doesn't. Whereas Kansas, I feel good. Oklahoma, I feel good. I don't have enough at UCF to feel like great about them. So there's 7.
I think the other thing you have to add is that UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati are coming from lower divisions or lower level of football for a lot of the casual college football fan. I don't think anybody really knows like what does that transition look like. Like, yeah, Javon Baker was really good in the AAC, but does that just do we just assume that he's going to be really good in the Big 12? I think you can make some of those assumptions, but yeah, like with the lack of depth, you look at the top and you're thinking this UCF team could be really good. Then what happens when they need guys 3 through 5 to step up and you're facing tougher competition?
Yeah, I think that's gonna be the issue for all of them. Obviously, I mean, I think this is the most talented of the wide receiver groups coming in potentially, but I don't have but that's also like the difference to me between UCF once we get to tiers and some of the other ones. It's not that it's closer than even the numbers indicate. Okay, so Joey, who do you have at 8?
Yeah, so the next few are going to be pretty close together, like you mentioned. I'm going to go with Baylor, and I really, really think that Monterey Baldwin is super underrated. I mean, he's a great deep threat. And then you add in Keatron Jackson from Arkansas. You add in that North Texas tight end, Jake Roberts, who nobody's really talking about, but he's really dynamic. And then you have Hal Presley coming back. So I think this is a Baylor offense that can kind of carry them. Their defense is a question mark, but I think that receiver core can actually carry them to wins this season.
Joe?
I have Houston here, a team that I've been very familiar with in the past few years. Losing Tank Dell obviously was going to be a huge loss, especially with the amount of targets that he saw over the last couple of years. I mean, at a certain point, it was just like, well, it's almost like a one-man route because we're just going to throw to Tank Dell and figure out how to get him the football. And I think that has to change this year, and it will change. I don't think there's a guy. I really like Matthew Golden, but I don't think he's a guy that can be that Tank Dell where he's the spotlight, and then there's a huge gap between him and the next guy. You look at Stephon Johnson coming in from Oklahoma State, Josh Cobb from Wyoming, and then you have a couple other guys coming back from last year, and Joseph Manjack, Samuel Brown, 2 other transfers. So I think that there's potential here. You throw in Donovan Smith as the quarterback, and I think that there's a good group here, but I just don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of salty because you with Dana because you look at last year. This is a team that went to the AAC championship in 2021. They returned most of their production from that year, and then they go 8-5. And Dana goes, "Well, making the AAC championship wasn't our goal this year." And it's like, "Well, what was your goal, and why was it not to do that again?" That I don't know. It just didn't really make any sense, and I don't really know if Houston is equipped to handle the Big 12 right now. I just don't know if the talent level is there, but I do like some of these guys. Matthew Golden's been on my radar for a while, but again, I just don't know what this team looks like as a whole.
Fair. At number 8, I have Baylor, just like you, Joey. I think kind of like Kansas, like Monterey Baldwin, Hal Presley, Josh Cameron. Like, I feel like those guys all coming back are very reliable. Keaton Jackson is an interesting addition from Arkansas. And I'm very intrigued by Armani Winfield, who will be a redshirt freshman. He was a former 4-star recruit. Like, I I feel like this is going to be a very reliable unit. It's probably not going to be the sexiest unit. There may not be a stud on this unit anywhere. There might be. Someone might show up out of nowhere. I'm very high on Winfield. Like I think he's got real potential. But like it's just going to be a nice, reliable unit. Like there's no top piece, but I feel okay about the depth and given the way they play. Like I think they'll be fine. I think it's just a nice, solid unit, and that's fine. It's fine with me. Okay, at number 9, Joey.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Oklahoma State here. Obviously, I don't know much about the guys other than Brennan Presley because I mean they replaced quite a bit of them. But the consistency of great play in that system leads me to believe they'll be a pretty good offense. They'll have a pretty good receiver core, and I think I'm a little bit higher on Brennan Presley. I think he can kind of carry the thing. I know Oklahoma State has a history of leaning on one receiver with Tylan Wallace and Blackman and Bryant. I think that they could actually do that with Presley.
All right, Joe.
I'm with you there. I have Oklahoma State at 9. I think that had you not brought in Alan Bowman, I think they would be much lower just because nobody inspired me, even with Spencer Sanders. Like there was not this passing threat that you're thinking like, well, we got to back up a little bit. We got to make sure that we're keeping things in front of us. But if Alan Bowman can get back to his Texas Tech form, where I really liked what he was doing, then I think that this group, the passing attack, takes a tremendous step forward, and they'll probably be higher, honestly, on this list if that happens. You mentioned Jaden Bray before. I'm also high on him. I think that what he did in 2021 was really exciting. Another guy, Rashad Owens, we talked about, could be one of those guys that gets into the spotlight. But yeah, Presley is super good. Don't need to harp more on that. I think Charlie Jones has ruined all Iowa transfers because I keep hearing Arlen Bruce's name come up and how they're just expecting maybe a similar transition. But I'm like, okay, Charlie Jones is probably maybe an exception to that rule. If you're going for Iowa transfers at wide receiver, like we might need to rethink things. But yeah, this is a solid group. I just think that you have some questions at quarterback with Bowman not really playing for 2 whole years. You got to kind of get back into the swing of things. But there's definitely a lot of potential with Oklahoma State.
Okay, so I'm easily the OSU. That's fine. I will wear that Homer pin with pride. It's probably about as high as I'm going to be on any unit for OSU this year. At number 9, I have Houston here, and this is a very, very young receiving core. They're top 6 on the depth chart. 5 are sophomores or younger. I like the dad from Steven Johnson from OSU. Josh Cobb from Wyoming is a nice backup. Matthew Golden, people are very high on. I just like it's such an inexperienced unit overall. Golden's high. Can Golden carry that load? Like, can he be the guy? Because when you think about last year, like Tank Dell had to do everything, like everything. He was the workhorse player for them. If they have to do that again, like I don't know that Golden is that caliber. So I'm really concerned about a unit this young going into the Big 12, which is going to be tough. Like at tight end, I don't know. Like they got Michael Laughlin from West Virginia. They had Barnes, Logan Compton. This is a wide receiving core that is very young, very inexperienced. Wasn't great last year. I'm really concerned with the transition for this unit. Like they've probably got some potential there, but I don't see it in year 1.
Yeah, it'll be growing pains for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Joey, number 10.
All right, so we're at 10. I have BYU. I like Hill. I like Epps. It's going to be a solid receiver core. We'll see how it kind of translates, but they're used to playing Power 5 opponents. I mean, they played big-time opponents. They played Arkansas last year, Baylor. They played USC, Tennessee in recent seasons, and they fared pretty well. So I think it could translate. I just need to see it kind of on the field.
Joe?
I have Baylor here. I agree that this is a group that it has a lot of potential, kind of underrated group. I don't really have anything else to contribute to the guys that you guys already mentioned. It's a fun group with a lot of potential, but I think a lot of that hinges on if Blake Shapen can get them the football. And I know that he has a full year of experience now, so that's really good. But I'm kind of in that boat of I need to see it before I believe it. But the guys he's going to throw to give you lots of exciting options. And so if Shapen has it all figured out, then this group will be really fun to watch.
I have Kansas State here. First appearance for the Wildcats. It's not a unit I love, but I'm pretty high on Phillip Brooks in the slot. I think he's going to be able to be very effective for Kansas State. I'm really high on Ben Sinnott at tight end for them as well. Hey, guess what? Another Iowa transfer in the Big 12 with Keegan Johnson, a former 4-star.
Outside of culture fit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, if you don't want to play at Iowa anymore, go to Kansas State. Thanks, especially with Wisconsin doing what they're doing. But beyond that, like Xavier Lloyd, Seth Porter, RJ Garcia, Jaden Jackson, like they're all nice depth pieces, but I don't love this unit. And I don't typically love a Kansas State wide receiving core. Wide receiver is not a unit at Kansas State I'm like banging the drum for. But they do have two pieces I really like. If one of them goes down, major concern. But I'm high enough on Phillip Brooks. I'm high enough on Sinnott here. And because they utilize the tight end in the way they do, that I think it's going to be a reliable receiving core. And somebody else will step up. Someone typically does for Kansas State. They probably got someone like if you want to say of the Iowa's wide receivers that transferred, who's going to be the one that shows up? It would not shock me at all if it was Keegan Johnson because he went to Kansas State. It was just an easy transition and it made a lot of sense. So I like two pieces here. There's potential for a third one. And beyond that, it's a Kansas State receiving core. They typically do well even when they're not that impressive.
I'm right there with you. I mean, I have them next because Phillip Brooks, I mean, you have a 5'7" receiver who's catching jump balls. Like that's not normal. So, I mean, like you have that guy, you have Sinnott. I'm a big fan of those two. And then outside of that, they don't really need that many great receivers for their offense to function. I feel like they have two really good running backs to make it work. But those two receivers are going to be big time for them.
Yeah, I'm there with you. And Sinnott's almost like the outlier because his frame fits his position, and you're used to seeing, Phillip Brooks at 5'7", Deuce Vaughn at 4 foot nothing or whatever. You're just used to these undersized guys overachieving. And you're right, Phil. I agree. Keegan Johnson is the one Iowa transfer that if you're going to pick the guy to have the most success, it's because he's going into essentially the same system. It's just that he has a somewhat competent quarterback for the first time in his career, so that obviously helps quite a bit. So yeah, you're looking at a group that doesn't have a ton of depth, probably doesn't need a ton of depth. Just gonna embrace that culture that is K-State football, and they'll be just fine.
All right. Joe, you were the high man on BYU because I have them here at 11. The comp that they've played a lot of Power 5 teams, and I think that's the reason that BYU might kind of surprise teams this year. I'm a little bit worried about the defense. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, as someone who does fantasy football, I have Puka Nacua on every fantasy team that I can possibly find him. He is not there anymore for BYU. Like Cody Epps has a lot of potential. I really like Isaac Rex as far as tight ends go. Like he is a legitimate receiving threat, 77 catches for 940 yards and 21 touchdowns in the last 3 seasons. Like when they get into the red zone, they get around the goal line, like he is a legitimate touchdown threat. I think he'll continue to be that way in the Big 12. Like they brought in nice additions, Keelan Marion from UConn, Darius Lassiter from Eastern Michigan. Like there's some potential here. I worry about every single one of these receiving cores that doesn't have what I feel like is great depth trying to make this transition, even for BYU, who is used to playing Power 5 opponents. Like there's a big difference between the 21 season and the 22. The 21 season, they beat all those Pac-12 teams. They were all bad Pac-12 teams. And then they played all the good Pac-12 teams last year. And it was a very different situation. And so like, I do think BYU will be okay, but like, I'm not I'm not less just in love with this unit. Couple pieces I like. One I really like. I'm big on like let's find the really fun tight ends in the Big 12 and see who's going to make plays because it's just not a thing we were used to seeing, but it seems to be coming back. And I think Rex could end up being kind of the surprise tight end of the Big 12 this year. I think Cody Epps will be fun. Outside of that, we'll see. So Joey, that comes to you at number 12. Who do you have?
Well, at this point, it's like, who do I not like? So I'm not a huge fan of any of these three teams. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. They bring in 3 transfer receivers. And really it's more of, I really don't like the other 2. And there's really not much else I can say. Those 3 transfer receivers, I feel like they will probably be better than what Iowa State and West Virginia have.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm there with you. I have Cincinnati next. It's kind of like a Xavier Henderson. We've been waiting for him to have his breakout season at Florida for forever now, and he's at Cincinnati with a system that I don't know. It doesn't really give me a good feeling in terms of what they can do in the passing attack. I think that the culture there, I'm not going to say it's bad, but just Luke Fickell leaving after the heights that they've reached, like you knew they were going to take a step back, and now it's just a completely different culture. So we'll see what happens there. A guy that is going to be really fun to watch is Shimon Mateer at tight end. This is a guy who was recruited as a linebacker coming into Cincinnati, and Fickell's staff saw his speed and said that there's no way that you're going to just be a linebacker with the talent that we have. We're going to put you in a position where you can get the football and you can showcase some of that speed. So that's one guy I like in this group. But yeah, I mean, the last 3, I don't really have any arguments as to who should be 12th, 13th, or 14th. That's just like how bad this trio is.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head here. This is, like I said, we'll tier here in a minute. The last 3 are tier 4, and they're by far the worst of them all. Now, I don't have Cincinnati here. I'm much lower on them than you are. I have Iowa State, and understand like I don't think I've ever said anything nice on any pod, especially not wide receiving rankings, about Iowa State's receiving core because it's just not a unit that they ever do a very good job with. Well, Xavier Hutchinson is gone. And there is not another Xavier Hutchinson on this roster. Now, I like Jalen Noel in the slot. I do. Outside of that, like you bring back Dimitri Stanley, cool. Jaden Higgins is the Eastern Kentucky transfer, 87 for 1,151 and 13 touchdowns last year. Like I think he's going to be their primary downfield threat. After that, I'm never impressed with Iowa State's wide receiving core ever. Like if they have a guy, great. Maybe they find another tight end. Maybe they find a tight end this year that's going to step up. But like, someone will be the guy. Like I would put it on Higgins and Noel being the 2 of them. But outside of, but even that's just not. I'm not in love. I never am. So I've got Iowa State here. These bottom 3 are. You're right. It's take your pick. Who do you have 13, Joey?
Yeah, I'm going with Iowa State here. It's more of we know a little bit more about what Iowa State can do. I mean, West Virginia losing their top 4 receivers from last year. And I felt like they had a pretty good receiver core the last 2 or 3 years as a whole. But you lose all of that. Now we have Jalen Noel coming back. And then Jaden Higgins, I think he could be a pretty good receiver. But it's more of what we know from Iowa State than what we don't know from West Virginia.
Iowa State here, 13. Honestly, what the quarterback situation looks like will determine quite a bit, honestly, in my opinion. I think drops as well were a big concern at times for Iowa State, and that's not great with a new quarterback coming in. So that's concerning, but yeah, still, I don't know. Iowa State and West Virginia, it's like if you want one over the other, go for it. I'm not gonna be too upset about it. It's just not good situations either way, honestly.
But at this point, it sounds like Rocco Becht is going to be the starting quarterback, and I don't.
Would you bet money on that, or is that a 100 Deckers thing?
No, I put money on the under 5.5 at plus 120 all the way back in May. And I understand the irony of betting money on Iowa State under with the information that's very likely that a starting quarterback would not play because he bet money on games. I have West Virginia here. This is typically, you're right. West Virginia typically has a good receiving core, and they lost basically all 77%-ish of last year's production is gone, either from NFL, graduation, transfer portal. Like they bring back one senior in Cortez Braun. He had like 147 receiving yards last year. They brought in Devin Carter for NC State, who I think is expected to be like the guy for them. 25 catches, 406 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. They brought in Jashawn Polk from Kent State. I don't know. Like I don't know. I have no idea. Like I feel like guys are going to step up, and West Virginia typically has a good receiving core. And because when you lose everybody, it's always like, well, we don't know who anybody is, so they're going to be bad. Like I have more faith, even though I have them ranked second to last. Like of this bottom unit, West Virginia is easily the one to me that could skyrocket up the most. Because there's not enough evidence through Matt Campbell's era to believe in Iowa State suddenly having a great receiving core. I have Cincinnati. I have last. Obviously, they don't even know who their starters are. No one can put out a depth chart because no one has any idea. Like West Virginia, to me, with the history they have, especially on offense, of saying like some guys are going to step up and be good. They're just at this point, I have no idea of who that's going to be or how to judge it from here.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Carter's the only one who really moves the needle, but they could be good. They could be good. It's just the quarterback is what's going to make it so difficult. I don't believe in Garrett Green, but I mean the track record of receiver development there could turn things around. It's just I just don't know based on what they have if they have it to be one of the best receiver cores.
Yeah, I'm there with you. And the more I think about it, it's like, how would I rank these 3 quarterbacks? Whether, without Deckers, just whoever Iowa State's quarterback is going to be, Emory Jones, who's yet to put things together, and Garrett Green, who's going into a year with a new coordinator. And just not really any proven weapons out wide. I will say that Kent State is one of the biggest losers of the transfer portal this year. I mean, I think we learned a lot about Kent State's ability to recruit with the amount of talent that they sent to other programs. But I think the big thing is now you lost all those teams, and a guy like Sean Polk, who was probably their 3rd best option, now goes to West Virginia to maybe be the 2nd best option on an offense that is probably going to look pretty rough. So and that's not great for Neil Brown going into a year where you need to find a way to a bowl game at least, and you need to show some sort of life. And it's gonna be tough to do when you're ushering in a brand new looking offense outside of obviously CJ Donaldson and that offensive line.
Love the offensive line of CJ Donaldson. Neil Brown, I think, retaking the play calling on the offensive side of the ball over again. So we'll see how that goes. I have Cincinnati at the bottom. Chris Scott's the only guy back, and he brought in a bunch of transfers. And I think Donovan Ollie might be maybe the best of the transfers. If you want to say it's Xavier Henderson, that's fine. Didn't see much from D. Wiggins before he got hurt 3 games in the season at Louisville, but maybe he could be good. Like I think you've got 3 guys who brought in transfers who are all to me they're okay. They could all be good. They could all be what we saw at their previous stops on a team with Emory Jones as the quarterback. I got nothing for Cincinnati. I've talked to some people and it's like, I don't know, starters might be this. Who knows?
It's so throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks is kind of their approach right now.
Mud is inappropriate. Yeah, it's just mud. That's great. We'll
say mud and not a different word that I don't think I'm allowed to say on this podcast.
That it's fine. It's been said before. It'll be said again. But no, I get it. Okay, so let's wrap this up by kind of tearing this off. I told you guys about this before we started recording, so I'll go first in case you need some time. Look, we said it. Texas could be a tier on their own. I put Texas Tech in tier 1 with Texas. Those are the only two teams there because I do think that Texas Tech's depth, the number of quality receivers they have, it's not the same as Texas, but I really like that unit. So it's just a 2-team tier 1. Tier 2, I've got 4 teams with Oklahoma State, TCU, Oklahoma, and Kansas. They all have a lot of things that I like. They all have concerns, obviously, because everybody past 1 and the tier 1 is got questions. I have enough that I like of OSU, TCU, Oklahoma, and Kansas to put them together. Tier 3 is UCF, Baylor, Houston, Kansas State, and BYU. I got 5 teams there where I've got a lot of questions, I've got concerns, but there's at least something I really like there. Either it's you've got enough quality at enough positions, you've got a guy that I love, or just there's something there that I really like, and then there's a lot of just unanswered. And that tier 4 is the last 3 we talked about: Iowa State, West Virginia, Cincinnati. I'm just like I don't like these units. Like even and I feel bad for Iowa State. Like I like Jalen Noel, but he's not enough to move you out of the bottom tier. So Joey, how do you got these broken down?
Yeah, I agree with the top 2. I feel like those are 2 complete units with Texas and Texas Tech. To have 4 or 5 receivers that you can definitely depend on no matter what, that kind of safeguards against injury, which, Texas had a little bit of trouble with Isaiah Nayor. Then you had Xavier Worthy having to be Isaiah Nayor and Xavier Worthy at the same time. So that kind of messed up the offense. But after that, I really like TCU, UCF, Houston, Oklahoma. I feel like that's a solid unit there. And then after that, most of the middle is all together. I can't really discern much between 7 and 11, really. And then the last 3 to me are pretty solidly in the bottom. Cincinnati, unproven. Iowa State, proven to be not that great. And then West Virginia, not proven. So those are kind of my tiers.
Okay, I like it. Joe, how do you have yours broken down?
The more I think about it, I'm gonna, I agree with Texas and Texas Tech. I'm also gonna throw TCU in tier 1. I just simply because of the coaching staff and what they could do. I really like that group. And then after that, I mean, honestly, tier 2, 4 through 11, I can't really pick like a group that could be tier 3 over tier or whatever. Yeah, so or tier 2 over tier 3. So honestly, it's like those top 3 are tier 1, 4 through 11 are tier 2, and then out of respect for tier 2, I'm gonna skip tier 3 because that's how bad the bottom 3 are. So they're gonna be tier 4. So I still have 4. 3 is nobody, and then tier 4 because that's the gap is Iowa State, Cincinnati, West Virginia.
That's good. I appreciate that. It's fine. Look, we said it. Like there's not a ton separating the middle. It's why we all have. I mean, I think we have a pretty mixed bag there in the middle. I'm way higher on OSU than the rest of you. Joe's way higher on BYU than me or Joey. And from there, I'm not sure that Joey is super high on anyone compared to the rest of us. And because I go
Texas, he's way too high in Texas.
Yeah, this is what I get for bringing someone who covers Texas onto the podcast to talk about. Maybe Houston. You had Houston 6th, and Joe had him 8, and I had him 9. So maybe that's the biggest outlier for it. Well, this has been fun. You guys are awesome. They did not get confusing with Joey and Joe, so that's a good thing. I was a little bit worried about it when I realized what I had done to myself for this one, but you guys have done honest. This is great. Joey, do me a favor. Where can everybody check out all the work you do covering the Texas Longhorns?
Yes, so you can find me on LonghornsWire for USA Today. It's an exciting time with fall camp coming up and underway. So longhornswire.com.
Joe, plug all the things that you do, which are very many, very, very many.
Oh man. Mostly just find me on Twitter at Joe Broback. You'll find my college football preview for the 2023 season. That's pretty much it. That's all you really need to know.
Joe ranked his top 50 Big 12 players on Twitter, so you can find all of those. I would suggest if you haven't yet, it's a free college football preview magazine from Joe. Go download it, scroll through it. It's fantastic. Joe's got stuff on YouTube, which I enjoy watching. Joe, you're one of my favorite, man. I appreciate you coming on every year. Let's figure out what you haven't done for next year. So I'll just go ahead and pencil you. I'm probably like quarterbacks. I don't know. I'm just gonna pick like just safeties. I don't remember. I don't remember what all you have.
Backup kickers. Let's do backup kickers.
Okay, Joe will be ranking Big 12 special teams next year. That's what Joe will be doing. Joey, you guys have been awesome. Talk to you again soon.